Alright, good Tuesday morning. This is that man A&J back with the best of pro wrestling and sports talk, the best of sports and pro wrestling talk. Either way it goes, you know you're going to get the best right here, right now. And of course, we're going to get right into things. Starting with an interesting departure from WWE's, I guess what we're going to call this for right now, Carmella. Now, on one hand, I've actually heard folks say that she's being released. Others have actually come out and say that she's just not being re-signed, similar to Sonya Deville. I'm not really sure which it is, but one thing that I am certain of is apparently she's got some things to say about the situation, and she'll be doing so later on this week in a podcast. Now, I am going to be definitely keeping eyes wide open for said podcast, as, I mean, why wouldn't I? This is pretty important stuff, and I might even come through with a reaction video immediately thereafter once I've at least heard enough of the podcast to know which way I'm going to go with what I'm going to say. But this is incredibly intriguing right now. I mean, you've got the situation regarding Corey Graves, where he was suspended for about a week or two, just given the situation where he's been involved regarding WWE commentary, programming-wise. Of course, now he's been joined with Booker T and Vic Joseph on NXT. I don't know. It's just really, really intriguing to see how this is all going here. But it's funny to me for a variety of different reasons, some of which I'm going to talk about towards the end of the video. But like, we're at a point to where we're starting to kind of, I don't know how I want to say this. It's just gotten incredibly strange how we've stumbled upon these situations, but all I know is that look forward to more on this later in the week when she does come through on this podcast, because there's a lot to be said for things that have been said behind the scenes, whether it's been WWE, AEW, or even TNA to some degree. I mean, it really depends, and this is something that you get with literally a lot of different wrestling companies. Hell, just with work environments in general. Again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but kind of looking forward to what unfolds from this. That's all I'm going to say from here on that. With that, we're going to move on to another female free agent, or soon to be anyway, Elektra Lopez. It turns out that sooner than later we're going to have an actual landing spot for her, and that landing spot turns out to be TNA Wrestling. I think this is a great move for her. It's a perfect fit for her, a perfect fit for that women's division, as you've had significant departures, namely that of one Jordan Grace to, interestingly enough, NXT, and also, interestingly enough, there's that working relationship with WWE. Now, there's a conversation I've been having with Darren recently about specifically the situation with Tessa Blanchard, and just a lot of things that tie into that, which we'll talk about in the future here. But for right now, this is something that's going to be good for her once her 90-day no-compete clause is up and she's actually able to make this move. I think she's going to be a great addition for the women's division, and again, this is going to be something great for her. You look at performers like Li Xing, formerly Xia Li. I'm already forgetting how, see, wouldn't be an A&J video, but anyway, Xia Li doing really well over there. And of course, we've also got Ash by Elegance, formerly known as Dana Brooke from WWE. Why do I mention those names specifically? Obviously, they've been repackaged since coming back to, or since moving over to TNA Wrestling, and I feel like that's probably going to wind up being the case for Elektra, but it's also possible she keeps her name. I don't know. We're going to wind up finding out here in the next few months, but definitely some really good news here for Elektra. I'm looking forward to when she actually ends up with TNA Wrestling. With that in mind, we're actually going to move along to some really interesting stuff here, which I'm really sure not I'm really not sure what to make heads or tails of this either. There's definitely a lot going on with it. I'm not even sure how I want to say it, but CM Punk turns out to be involved with a bit of a lawsuit that also seems to involve AEW. And the plaintiff in question is actually Nick Nemeth. Or not Nick Nemeth, Ryan Nemeth, the brother of Nick Nemeth, formerly known as Dolph Ziggler. There is an insane amount of language and verbatim going on with this story that I'm not even going to bother going into it. I'm just going to say this is incredibly wild given the fact that, one, you got to think about the circumstances surrounding CM Punk's return to WWE, which, of course, this is all based on it being a last chance situation. He cannot have a single slip up, yet there's talks of all the things that, if we're being perfectly honest, you figured he'd have been gone from WWE a long time ago, but he's been the complete polar opposite of what's been described, especially in everything for this lawsuit has been filed. There's no official case number for it yet, but perhaps that'll wind up changing here soon, and even more so the fact that Ryan Nemeth is actually demanding a jury trial, which not really sure how that's going to work out. I just know that this is incredibly intriguing and incredibly wild just for the fact that I think we're going to wind up getting a lot more information about what happened in all these situations involving CM Punk, going back to Brawl In, or Brawl Out, I think it was, and then Brawl In. I mean, it's just funny that these took place respectively at All Out and All In pay-per-views, but at any rate, yeah, this, again, much like the Carmella situation, going to be really, really interesting to see, but more so because, again, Punk has been a polar opposite of this since being back in WWE, and is largely one of the more popular acts in WWE today. I mean, wow. Really, really wild stuff. Again, can't wait to see what's going to wind up coming from that, but going from stuff we can't wait to see what happens from there, it's really wild because I'm wondering what's really happening right now. I think a lot of us are when it comes to The Rock. Interestingly enough, I'll probably end up having a video later about the situation with TKO and WWE, particularly WWE headquarters employees, and that one's a story unlike any other. But speaking of stories unlike any other, we got The Rock, the final boss, coming back to SmackDown this past Friday night. And he wants to Shang Tsung Cody Rhodes. But he actually literally proposes it to Cody Rhodes. Like, that's gotta be some of the wildest shit I have imagined anything being thrown in. But even wilder, the fact that, you know, a lot was talked about how there was some last minute changes to Friday night's episode of SmackDown, and that's the funny thing about it. I actually enjoyed this past Friday's episode of SmackDown. This is easily, for me, the best 3-hour episode they've had thus far. But this is easily the most baffling aspect of it because, of course, The Rock comes out to a hot New Orleans crowd, announces that New Orleans will be the home of WrestleMania 42, then turns heel on them, basically accusing every last one of them of having STDs, even threatens a fan of slapping the syphilis right off his face, which would have been hilarious as hell, but just the fact that he said it was something else. But then we wind up having him just I don't know. It's just real wild. But the bottom line here is that he's looking to have Cody become his corporate champion, the way that he was the corporate champ for Vince McMahon back in the day. I mean, I'm cool with that idea. It makes sense. Kind of a passing of the torch of sorts. Interestingly enough, I kind of have a feeling that it will more likely be the last guy that we just talked about, CM Punk. We'll talk about that in another video. But this for me is kind of weird because there's an awful lot of vagary and a lot of people still don't know what to make of it. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm the first one that put out the whole thing about him getting Shang Tsung in the first place. Put out the memes, gifs, and all that and everything. But, not that I'm trying to take credit or anything, it's just amazing that the rest of the internet is running with it accordingly. And, man, I gotta say, of course, the reality is that Cody is going to give his answer to the proposal this coming Saturday at Elimination Chamber in Toronto. And I gotta say, this is some of the wildest, out of nowhere shit that not only is it crazy enough to work, but it's going to be that much more interesting seeing how it works. Again, speaking of things to look forward to seeing how they unfold, but yeah, that's probably going to be the ideal stopping point for me on that one. Y'all know what it is. Let me know what y'all think. Do y'all think Cody accepts the proposal? Do you think it's someone else? Again, we're going to talk about it. I think it somehow ends up being CM Punk. But again, that'll be for another video later on. With that in mind, I'm going to go ahead. Y'all know what it is. Like, share, subscribe. Let me know what y'all think down below. And, man, this is pretty interesting shit. I just can't wait to Saturday and everything else thereafter. Anyway, this has been your time with A&J, and I appreciate you spending it here with me.